Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
There's been a sharp rise in the number of serious violent crimes and sex offences recorded by police in England and Wales. And official figures show cases of murder and manslaughter are at their highest level in almost a decade. However, a separate survey based on people's experiences rather than figures recorded by the police suggests that overall crime is continuing to fall. Our Home Affairs correspondent Tom Simons reports.
Behind the statistics, wasted lives. A decade after Mishac Cornelio first tried out the bike he'd been given as a present, he became one of the 4 young men stabbed to death in London on New Year's Eve, leaving his father confronting a nightmare.
You saw his body?
Yes.
What is it like for a father to see his son dead in front of him?
Oh, I could not hang up. That's all I was crying. Slowly.
He tells us in his native Portuguese he has no idea why it happened, what might have been going on in Mishac's life.
My advice for other parents would be to talk more to your kids. Try to find out, even if you think they have secrets away from home.
Today's figures set out the rise in violent crime recorded by police. Knife crime went up by 21%, gun crime up by 20%. Manslaughter and murder went up by 10%. Now, the official survey of crime shows that the number of people who say they've been a victim is falling steadily. But police records are seen as an accurate measure of serious violent crime. And despite schemes like these bins where knives can be handed in, no questions asked, it is rising steadily.
He said, "I didn't mean to kill him, that wasn't my intention. I just wanted to wet him up, slash him, cut him across the arm, take photos and upload it onto social media."
This is Alison Cope, and she's talking about the murder of her own son. Her audience, students at Coventry College.
We're in Ibiza, 2012.
Josh Ribera was better known as the grime artist Depps Man to his thousands of fans. A single slash of a knife took his life in 2013.
His eyes flicker, they close, hits the floor.
It's a tough listen. Alison tells them these are the consequences, but carrying a knife is your choice. She believes telling them not to doesn't work and says that's how the government's current policy comes across.
They are standing up and doing their token gesture and it isn't working. How many young people have to die for them to admit that what we're doing is not correct?
True, government policy recently has centred on enforcement. Tough rules on knives, tough policing, tough sentences. But today ministers appeared to signal a change towards Alison's way.
We have to get to the root causes and we have to work as a society, government, police and civil society to try and get to the root of this cultural issue and try and steer young people away from violence.
But serious proposals for work with young people are not going to come cheap. And by the way, police numbers are now at their lowest level for 2 decades. Tom Simons, BBC News in the West Midlands.
Our Home Editor Mark Easton is here. So we've got 2 separate sets of figures. One says that serious violent crime is up. The other says that overall crime is down. It's confusing. What is the reality?
Well, my interpretation actually is that broadly, this is very good news, but with a real note of caution. Good news because, by the best measure we have, the chances of someone watching this programme being a victim of crime is at its lowest level, this is England and Wales I should say, is at its lowest level since records began. The number of victims, 10% down year on year, and actually 60% down since the number we had in the mid-90s. So that's an encouraging picture. That comes, as Tom was saying, from what people actually say to pollsters about their experience of crime. This is not what's reported to or recorded by the police. Now, the note of caution is around, as we've been hearing, those categories of violent crime recorded by the police. So knife crime, gun crime, homicide. These are categories which the police are recording in larger numbers. And I think, given the serious nature of them, we are probably seeing something real. Now, your chances of being a victim even of those kind of crimes, even homicide, are lower now than they were 10 years ago, but are we seeing them start to tick up? They're relatively rare events. But the distress and harm, clearly, that these issues cause is huge, and that's why the police and politicians, of course, want to reduce them.
Our Home Editor Mark Easton, thank you.
There was alarming evidence today of the extraordinary pressure facing some of our most vital public services. New NHS figures showed hospitals and ambulances in England are struggling to cope, and Northern Ireland has suffered especially badly this winter. There's been a worrying rise in the number of rough sleepers on England's streets, with campaigners branding it a failure of society. But we start tonight with a big rise in violent crime. New data shows there's an average of almost 4,000 violent incidents every day in England and Wales, with police officer numbers at a 20-year low. Martin Geisler reports from Birmingham, one of the worst affected cities.
We're travelling through the streets of Birmingham's Small Heath with officers from West Midlands Police. Project Yawbridge is underway today, designed to crack down on organised crime.
You got your ID with you? No, I haven't got no ID, you know. No. Got your details, mate. Right. What for? Why? Because we're in a high crime area and you got anything on you shouldn't have.
These young men were pulled over for a driving offence. There was no evidence of anything more sinister, but violent crime is on the rise nationwide, and officers here, as everywhere, have found themselves stretched at times. Police numbers across England and Wales haven't been as low as they are now since comparable records began, and there is frustration on the front line.
We're stretched. We have an awful lot of jobs that come in, an awful lot of logs to attend, an awful lot of crimes that have happened, and limited people to send, and sometimes not a lot of people to send. It's just depressing, I'll be honest. I don't like to see that the crime figures are high, but we're still out there doing the job, and we're still locking up people that are committing crime.
But just this week, more evidence of the brazen nature of a problem that's striking every single day. A shopkeeper just outside Birmingham, set upon by a gang wielding hammers as he emptied a cash machine. He fought them off.
I want them to get out of the shop now and set this panic button. Fear wasn't the issue at that time neither. It happened so quick.
The real concern, though, is knife crime. It's up by 20%. Behind every statistic, of course, there's a story. In the corner of a living room in a Birmingham terrace, Dan Baird's ashes sit in an urn. He was one of 4 young men stabbed to death in the city in a single week last summer. Knife crime has been described as epidemic here.
Knife crime is something that happens to somebody else. It doesn't happen to yourself. I think you probably block it out. Just think, oh God, those poor people. And then it happens to you. It always happens to somebody else and then it happens to you. That's how I can describe it.
And what's it done to you?
It's devastated us. It's totally devastated us.
And today's figures are a reminder that more families will suffer. Rising crime rates versus a shrinking police force has the feel of a difficult fight. Well, Labour accused the government of being complacent on crime today. The Policing Minister, Nick Hurd, said he is very concerned about the uptick in the most serious violent crimes, but he also pointed to another survey that's just been released which records crime in a different way. It speaks directly to people, face to face, and some people believe it's more accurate because it doesn't get entangled in the vagaries of how crimes are recorded and reported. And interestingly, he said that survey suggested there was a 9% drop in overall crime last year.
OK, Martin Geisler in Birmingham, thank you.
Now, violent crime is on the rise in England and Wales, with new figures showing recorded incidents involving knives and guns rose sharply over the year ending September 2017. Opposition MPs described it as shocking and blamed cuts in police funding. Ministers insisted that overall crime was still falling and it was taking urgent action to tackle serious violent offences. From Birmingham, Paul McNamara reports.
So, yeah, this is a book of Joshua. And I just try and show people that on the headline it's 18-year-old stabbed to death, rapper. Well, no, it's that little boy there as a baby. That's who I've lost, my son, my little boy.
Behind every statistic is a story, a person. Few appreciate that more than Alison. 4 years ago, her son Joshua died when an argument outside a nightclub escalated. More have died since. Figures released today reveal knife crime is rising significantly. It's a trend that terrifies Alison.
People need to realise this can happen to anybody at any time. I went to sleep, woke up on the 20th of September, not realising that would be the last day I saw my child alive. I kissed him goodbye, he left. The next time I saw him, he was rock hard and cold and dead. So it can happen, and it will happen again. There'll be people watching this that in the following year will be in my position.
Alison's warning is stark. But then again, so are the figures released today by government.
The number of offences involving a knife or a sharp instrument had been falling since 2011, but the last 3 years they've been on the rise again. Last year, almost 37,500 knife crimes were recorded. That's up 21%. And it's not just the use of knives that's on the rise either. Gun crime offences are up 20%. In fact, last year, almost 1.3 million violent crimes were recorded, a rise of 20%.
A separate crime survey based on people's experiences suggests overall crime is falling, and lowering crime rates is what Simeon now devotes his life to.
Like I got involved in gangs crime and all that when I was young. You know what I'm trying to say? I got to the height of it where I was on the earth, where I was at a pinnacle point where I could go to jail for the rest of my life.
To you, this might be just a porter cabin on this patch of wasteland. To Simeon, it's an opportunity to keep the young from his community out of prison or even alive.
And who's this for then?
Well, this is for the kids around this local area. This is not the whole of Aston, just this part of it. It's probably like 4.
Are there many places like this?
No, not really, or not where the kind of kids that are out really on the streets really carrying knives and that.
Is that part of the problem then?
It's definitely part of the problem. Like it's not even just that the fact of the spaces, but spaces where they've got young positive role models that can chat to them and relate to them.
One of the good brothers around here, you get me? There's many more. You could be one of them. Right.
Simeon tries to bring in positive role models and teach the youngsters that come here multimedia skills. More schemes like this are needed, argued the Labour Party today. Also needed, they say, more police officers on the street.
Of course police officers matter, but they're not the whole picture here. This is about law enforcement, regulation, and really smart work around prevention and work in communities to try and steer young people away from violence.
Increased policing, more youth projects. However government is to tackle rising knife violence, they need to tackle it fast, says Alison. So no more parents are left with just photos.
Paul McNamara reporting.